I still remember that night like a bruise. I kept pressing just to see if it still hurt. We were seated around the oval dining table, my father at the head, my mother beside him, Aunt Helen scraping green beans onto her plate in the same distracted way she operated her life. My little brother Mark sat across from me, knife and fork poised for attack, while the rest of the family formed an indifferent-looking jury. It was roast chicken night, the smell thick and salty, prickling every sense into high alert. Outside, dusk fell over Lowe's Angels, the golden light squeezed between dusty blinds and onto the cheap imitation wood floor. They had already begun questioning me as soon as the meal started, but it ratcheted up now, the warmth in the room thickening into tension. Dad set down his fork, his shirt was ironed, collar too tight, tie loosened only a little. He squinted at me, lines deepening across his forehead. "So what's the plan again, Lydia?" His voice carried the weight of a judge pronouncing sentence, heavy and public. "You're going to interrogate celebrities for a living?" Mom glanced over at him, lips pinched. Aunt Helen's chuckle was soft but icy. "Investigative journalism," she said, letting the words hang. "That's cute. Is that something you learned about on YouTube?" My throat tightened, but I kept my face calm as if that could be enough. "It's not about celebrities, Dad. There are stories no one's paying attention to. Corruption, cover-ups, injustices no one reports." He cut me off, voice louder now. "And who pays your rent while you chase fairy tales? Your big break, do you think it's just waiting around the corner?" The others snickered. Uncle Ron, the car salesman with his withered hopes, and my cousin Ivy with her Instagram makeup tutorials. Only Mark stared down at his chicken, chewing thoughtfully. I felt the urge to answer with tears or shouting, but I said nothing, and the absence of my reaction filled the room like fog. My father's gaze sharpened, trying to provoke something, but I would not let him. I swallowed the lump of disappointment and nodded once. "I'll make it work, you'll see." It was a promise to myself more than to them, and it floated above the table unanswered. Even then, in that small moment of resolve, I saw the faces turn away, from embarrassment, from disbelief, from that peculiar softness pity brings. It was loneliness made visible. I left before dessert. The city was a blur through the windshield as I drove back to my apartment, headlights painting the scattered palms silver in the darkness. It was the kind of silence where the car becomes a confession booth, where you examine every word said until the engine finally clicks off. I sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, telling myself their laughter didn't matter. My fists ached, but I promised I would hold on until the dream was real. The first year nearly broke me. The job market treated my degree like junk mail. My email inbox overflowed with silent rejections. The ones that replied were formulaic, the kind of polite dismissal that sounds more like a prediction than an encouragement. I took anything, temp jobs, food service, copywriting for obscure blogs. I wrote freelance pieces nobody read for pennies. My apartment was a shoebox looking out over Melrose, the walls so thin I learned the rhythms of my neighbor's Netflix binges. Some nights I'd eat ramen crammed on my twin mattress, listening to the city's hum and thinking about every story that deserved the light. The big breaks everyone jokes about aren't big at all. Usually, they look like tiny doors you only notice because you're crawling on your hands and knees. Mine was an assignment for an alt-weekly no one had heard of, covering a rumored scheme involving a local contractor and affordable housing funds. It wasn't glamorous. The offices reeked of burnt coffee, and the editor was a woman named Shell, whose laugh was a bark and whose faith was measured in how much you could bring in on a deadline. She told me she didn't need idealism, she needed facts, but as I left that day with a yellowed press badge and a bus map, I caught her look, skeptical maybe but not mocking. That was enough. I spent days in libraries, weeks in council meetings, learning to be invisible in rooms filled with grown men congratulating each other for siphoning the city's future. I collected public records with trembling hands. I talked to mothers in crumbling apartments, their eyes darting with fear, their voices hushed. I learned the subtle art of getting a quote from someone who didn't want to be quoted. The first story ran above the fold, a photo of broken balconies and caution tape. Shell sent me a text at 2 a.m. "Nice work, stay on it." I reread her words maybe 20 times, the warmth of them beating out the chill of those old dinner table dismissals. I finished a bottle of cheap wine and tacked the article to the wall above my laptop, a makeshift badge of survival. But the story didn't stop there, and neither did I. The housing corruption bled into more sinister territory, bribes exchanged in parking lots, city planners taking cash for silence, real estate sharks with bloody teeth. Dead ends were frequent, and so was fear. Once I found my car windshield smashed. Another time a tipster called to threaten me, voice metallic with menace. What kept me going was not just anger or stubbornness, it was something quieter and heavier, a faith that these stories mattered beyond the headlines, that if I didn't bring them to light, no one would. Success, when it came, was not a hurricane. It was more like rain that seeps through the roof one drop at a time until suddenly the whole floor is soaked. My exposés grew teeth. They led to city investigations, to arrests, to televised debates. National publications picked up my byline. I moved out of my shoebox and into a place with real windows, plagued now not by thin walls but by the ache in my chest every time someone called for another story, another scandal uncovered. Years passed, my parents' calls became brief, obligatory. Their voices stayed carefully neutral, as if afraid of inviting another wound. Mark grew up, started college, called late at night for advice on classes and life. Then came the nomination. Shell's email was all caps, barely coherent. "Lydia, you did it. Pulitzer shortlist. You're heading to the ceremony, aren't you?" At first, I stared at the message, doubting the words, me. The girl who left the table before dessert, who everyone said would fail, would crawl back home begging for sense. I accepted, of course, but the news travelled ahead of me, as news often does. The night before the ceremony, my mother called. Her voice trembled at first, then found its axis. "Your father says congratulations, we saw your name on the news. She stopped, lost for words, then whispered, "We're sorry we doubted you." I wanted to say it was okay, that it didn't matter. But there was a piece of me that wanted her to feel the emptiness their laughter had left. A silence filled the call, but this time it was not resignation, it was recognition, however late. The Pulitzer ceremony was in New York, all brilliant lights and nervous colleagues. I didn't win runner-up, they announced, but the applause was loud, my byline on the screen, my stories referenced in speeches. Shell cried during dinner afterward and handed me a fountain pen, heavy and cold, a symbol more potent than any award. But for me, triumph wasn't the applause or even the nomination. It was a call I received a week later. The local council wanted to honor me back in LA. The story had sparked real change, a contractor indicted, building codes reformed. "Come home," the email said, "let your city thank you." Home, the word rattled inside me. It meant motel billboards, lazy palms, and the familiar comfort of disappointed faces, but I went. When I arrived, the sun was brutal, June in Los Angeles, raw and dazzling, everything tinged with longing. The city looked unchanged at first, smoggy, sprawling, a mess of traffic and promise, but something felt different. Maybe it was just me, walking tall, dressed crisp, credentials on my name tag like a scarf finally stitched closed. The community center where they hosted the honor was nondescript, stucco and murals faded, still standing from the years I'd spent hurrying past. Inside, folding chairs faced a tiny stage. The crowd was larger than I'd expected, neighbors, activists, council members in ill-fitting suits. A banner stretched across the room, "Thank you, Lydia Grant, Truth Matters." I found my family near the back. Dad in his pressed shirt, thinner now, his hair laced with grey, Mom holding her purse tight, face unreadable, Mark waving at me, pride plain in his eyes. For a second, I was that girl at the dinner table, knees knocking, dreams aching under their scrutiny. But only for a second. The council member stepped up first. "Today," she said, "we honor one of our own. Lydia Grant's investigative work has sparked reforms that will save countless families." She beckoned to me. I walked to the stage, my heart beating so hard I thought it might break my ribs. For a moment, the room was silent except for the whir of old fans. Then she handed me a framed letter, official letterhead, signature at the bottom. "Here is the city's formal resolution, acknowledging the impact of your journalism." A wave of applause crashed through the hall. I glanced out, saw faces flush with pride, some with shame. My family, my father especially, looked smaller, suddenly human, wrenched from their certainty. There was a hush as I took the podium. My speech was brief. I was never good at grandstanding. "I grew up in this neighborhood," I said, voice steady. I listened to stories at this very table, stories of fear, of frustration, of hope. For years, my only goal was to find the truth and share it, to shine a light where people preferred darkness. This honor isn't mine alone. It belongs to everyone who trusted me, who spoke to me even when they were afraid. And to those who doubted me, your skepticism forced me to dig deeper, work harder. Thank you. I caught Dad's eye, a rare thing, our gazes locking. I saw regret there, but also relief. For a moment, I hoped he saw me as I was, not as the failure he once predicted. After the ceremony, people came up to shake my hand, press folded notes into my palm, whisper thank yous. A mother hugged me, makeup staining my shoulder, eyes wet with gratitude. Because of you, we have a new apartment, she said. Another man told me I'd given him courage to protest, that he'd watched me on the news and thought, if she can do it, maybe I can too. But the most powerful moment came when my family and I gathered near the front, alone at last. Dad cleared his throat, voice rough. I was wrong, Lydia. His hands shook as he reached out, uncertain. I didn't see it then, but I see it now. You did what none of us could. You made them listen. His eyes filled, brighter than I'd ever seen, and he took my hand. Mom stepped forward, pulling me into a hug, her body trembling, the kind of embrace I'd missed for years. We are so proud of you, she whispered. It was soft, softer than the mockery, softer than silence. Mark stood grinning, eyes burning with something fierce and wonderful. We left together, walking outside into the sun. The parking lot shimmered with heat, cicadas buzzing, even the smog holding a kind of hope. My family walked beside me, not to lead or to scold, but to witness. The city loomed in the distance, concrete and luminous, a place that had almost broken me and now welcomed me home. We drove back through familiar streets, the ones where I'd first learned what it meant to be doubted. Dad suggested dinner, roast chicken maybe, or whatever I wanted. I smiled, thinking of all the fights at the table, all the words unspoken and unsaid. That night I sat at the same table where it all began. The house had aged, walls yellowed, memories packed tight in every corner, but the energy was different, no more sneers, no more laughter at my expense. Only silence where disbelief used to be, and in its place, the quiet strength of resolve fulfilled. We passed the bread, the peas, the wine. In between bites, conversation drifted to the mundane, to Mark's classes, Mom's garden, Dad's cholesterol. It was normal, wonderfully and achingly normal, and I let myself drift in it. As dinner ended, Dad raised his glass, to Lydia, for making us believe. We all drank, the gesture awkward but real. I felt the room fill, not with tension but with something tender, the knowledge that I had left, fought and returned, carrying their doubts as armor until I'd outgrown the need. Later, as I left the house, a soft wind carried the scent of jasmine through the window. The city was alive, humming with stories, with forgiveness, with beginnings and endings. I didn't need to look back to know that they saw me now, not as a cautionary tale but as proof, a testament to the stubborn, silent strength of believing in yourself when no one else will. And I knew, finally, that this was home.